This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Easthampton City Council Finance Committee meeting. It is our final budget meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work and patience with this process. I appreciate it. Let's see. Okay. Any minutes?
No, I was waiting for today's meeting, then it'll be all up to date after today.
Beautiful. Mayor's communication?
Thanks.
I want to go into public speak, but just before we jump into that, I just want to say a couple things about this process, just so that we are all communicating sort of on the same level. And I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, but as usual, I wrote too much, so I'm going to just sort of skim through it. So in the 90s, Easthampton was facing a catastrophic economic situation with mill closures and all this bad stuff. And largely in response to that, is my understanding, switched from having a town meeting form of government to having a strong mayor form of government. I wasn't there at the time. I actually didn't move to Easthampton until about 20 years after that point. But my understanding from talking to people who were there, who were involved in that process, that a lot of that was about empowering an individual to be able to move quickly and make decisive decisions about the city, as opposed to sort of a town meeting form of government, which only meets periodically, and the whole thing it's very inclusive, but it's also very inefficient. So that's sort of what we now have. We have a strong mayor form of government. The reason I bring this up is because in our current charter, the city council has a sort of limited mandate and scope in this budget process. So really specifically, we cannot take money from one thing and move it to something else. If there is an item that we think is too high, we can reduce a line item, but that's the scope of our work. I bring this up because every year there's discourse around the budget, as there should be, but there's often requests made to the city council, which maybe I would agree with, maybe I wouldn't, but I am literally unable legally to do. The only thing we can do here is identify line items that we want to cut or pass the mayor's budget as it stands. Those are our options. That's what's available to us. So there's a few other things that I just wanted to bring up that I sort of observed about this budget. And the first thing is, I really appreciate all of the work that the finance team put into it. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a budget that everybody loves. There's always going to be tough decisions that are made, but whether or not you agree with it, I think we can all agree everyone put a lot of work into getting this through, and that should be appreciated. I noticed, I think I learned in this process, all these words have been said to me before, but sometimes things sort of click, the second or third time you hear them. I think I really learned in this process the extent to which this year is we're sort of stepping into an unknown. For the last few years, we had these ARPA and ESSER funds available to us that we were using in many cases to fund expenses that otherwise we probably would have had to fund through appropriated revenue. And that led to some pretty staggering levels of free cash. These enormous surpluses that I know sparked a lot of public interest. How does the city have this much money? So we don't know what this year is going to look like in that respect. This is going to be a change. It could be that we once again come back with a really healthy surplus. And at that point, I likely will be pushing to say, are we estimating this right? But I think this year we need to be a bit risk averse because we don't know what we're going into. And I would also just say that this is nobody's fault. I'm not like and I'm not putting this on anybody, but I just, as a counselor who's been through this process on the finance committee for years and is now chairing it for the first time, one thing that I have noticed, I would love to someday see a way that we could get our budget process to a place where it's a bit more like performance driven or goal driven, insofar as to say that, like, I can say in this budget that there were X number of employees, or that the payroll line for a department went from X to Y. And I can ask and sort of get some math about whether that meant, is that an addition of the staff? Is that raises, that promotions? But what isn't really in there from that, I don't think anyone on the executive side would necessarily even know that we might want, but that I would sort of like to see someday, is like, why this number of people? What is the goal that, what is this department hoping to accomplish this year? And how, what are the resources that they need to accomplish those goals? And what happens if these services get reduced? You know, if we decided to make a cut in this department, like what would get reduced? These sorts of questions. I don't know how exactly how you go about doing that. I've read some stuff about it on the federal level. On the local level, maybe it's just too complicated, but it does lead to a situation where what we basically end up doing is looking at the line items and saying, well, did they go up a lot or not? And if they went up a lot, we ask, well, what's that all about? And we get an answer. So that's what we really did in this process. It's just, we're operating under the assumption that everything that we spent on last year was an appropriate amount of money, and that as long as it doesn't really depart from that, it probably continues to be appropriate, which is what I saw. There are only a few items where things did depart in a major way from the previous year. The biggest one being the school budget, which did have a 9-point-something% increase in order to absorb some ESSER funded positions dealing with kids' social and emotional well-being, that I think anyone who knows anybody under the age of 18, 10, I don't know, whatever the exact number is right now, could say, we probably need that. COVID was really rough on these kids, and I believe the people when they say they need those resources. So I'm all in favor of that. We saw a bunch of personnel expense items go up, and some of that has to do with the fact that we approved as a city council, a new pay plan schedule that we knew was going to lead to more expensive personnel. We all made that decision. We should not. Well, actually, I don't know if you were here at the time, JT, but the rest of us made that decision, and we should be prepared to see that. So nothing in there was crazy to me. And so when I'm here and I'm saying, this is my job to say okay, well, my one thing I can do here is, or my two things are cut or pass. I don't have any items here that to me seem inappropriate or wasteful or anything like that. Now, if there are members of the public or there are members of the council who have specific line items that they can identify saying, this is something we want to do, I might not move on that tonight, but I will consider it between now and the budget hearing, because that's my job to do that. But nothing stood out for me. Now, again, that operates on the assumption that last year's spending numbers were generally appropriate, because without having, I mean, being on the city council is a part-time job. Without sort of having feet on the ground in every single one of these departments, I don't know how I necessarily would identify that a given department really only needs 8 people but employs 9. Like, I don't know how I would find that information. I hope that the mayor would find that information, but in the case that was not the case, I don't know how I would identify it. So my job here, I think, is a little bit just trying to figure out how to do it really well. I haven't exactly figured out, but that I guess that's where I'm going. I wanted to say this before public speak, because I know that some of our friends who have come here to speak before have talked before about cutting things that are wasteful, cutting things that are excessive. And I guess what I'm saying is, just right off the bat as chair, and I don't speak for my colleagues, they might see this completely differently. I mean, I didn't see anything in there that looked wildly wasteful, but I want to hear, when we do our public speak and then when we go into the full budget hearing, I'd like, if somebody thinks that they see something that I don't, I'll hear them out, but that's my take on it is it looks pretty good. So thanks for indulging me on that. I'll open it up for public speak if anyone wants to speak.
So Kathy Wiginski, Overlook Drive. So I would actually ask that the finance committee not send the budget to the full city council, but back to the mayor. I have seen significant concerns that the infrastructure for the water and sewer are not being fully addressed. And since the 2018 tie-in bond report. If the indirect expenses are being charged to the enterprise fund, I would like to see that actually absorbed into the general city budget that's allowed under the enterprise fund rules. As much as I value the arts as a musician and a poet, I don't know that we need to be spending as much money on them when we have a significant problem with our sewer system that is not being addressed sufficiently. Clearly, we need better rates for the DPW staff if we keep losing staff to other places that can pay better. And those are positions that need experience and longevity in order to maintain those systems in an effective way. Without those systems being maintained sufficiently, we look at an environmental crisis. If the sewer system fails, that's a huge problem with the sewer leaking into our aquifer. And I think that needs to be our priority as much as I do value the art and other projects. They are not a necessity. They are secondary.
Okay, thanks for your, do you want to say anything?
Sure. My name is Jean Powell-Wilson. I am at Main Street, and I just want to, again, I want to encourage priority on the shoring up of the infrastructure issues related also to water and sewer issues, especially as there are a lot of future development, future projects here on 385 Main Street and 70 Oliver Street and Ferry Street. We know there are a lot of developments happening, and I believe that shoring up the infrastructure issues, it's an important foundation for anything else, whether it's future development, whether it's the arts, etc. I think it's just very important to prioritize. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thoughts to new business. Final budget votes. Councilors, do you have any thoughts on this? Any just, yeah, broadly, any thoughts before we start talking about votes? No? Go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think the first thing that I want to say, and this is to the folks who are online, and I this way as well, I don't feel like I'm at my back to people, but you know, I'm really I have a lot of respect for the work that you all do with a finite amount of funds. And I mean that wholeheartedly, right? Like, you are providing services to our community and to our residents that I think often goes unseen. I think sometimes it's not acknowledged in the ways that we wish that it would be, right? We all care about the work that we do, and sometimes the things that we do are not recognized. And one of the things that I had asked almost everybody, I may have missed a few people, but I asked if you were satisfied with this budget. Is this a fair budget to you? And everybody that answered said yes. Like, this is a budget that I'm able to work with, right? And I think that based on the goals that we have, right, that this is something that I can work with. And I appreciate and respect very much the honesty and the integrity by which you answered that question, right? Because that's not an easy question to answer, right? Particularly when your boss is sitting at the end of the table, right, so to speak. But I believed you, right? And that's something that I think is very important. And I also have a great deal of respect for the mayor and the finance team that worked to put this together, right? It's not 10 meetings that go into this, right? It's a year-long process of collecting receipts and making sure everything balances and trying to forecast and whatnot. And I think the things that I have learned most is that sometimes all of our challenges and issues that we have within the city can't be solved all at one time, right? We have to wait for things and opportunities that come from the state that actually reduce the financial burden that happens and makes it easier for us to be able to pay for those things. And we have a staff that has a finite amount of time, right, to be able to get all of those various things done within the course of a year. But I think what I want to say is that I have a lot of respect for the efforts that you all do and have done to put this budget together. And certainly every day I witness your commitment to the residents of this community. And I want you to know that I support the work that you do, and for not just residents, but people who visit our community and are able to get around within the community or bring their kids to schools, etc., or know that they're safe, right? And so I just want to, in this moment, acknowledge your work. I appreciate it.
Okay. Counselor, anything?
I have a few brief words. I don't really have a point of reference when it comes to this process, so I kind of came into this with my eyes wide open. I do have to say it wasn't as bad as I had heard it was going to be, so I'm thankful for that. I want to thank people like Kathy and Jean for coming to the meetings that they've come to and voicing their input. I wish more people would do that. So thank you for doing so. But I also want to echo the sentiments of my two other counselors on the committee of thanks to the finance team for all the work you've put in, because this is a daunting task. And the fact that we've come to this point, I just think is incredible. Like I said, I have no point of reference, but it's a lot and I'm very impressed. So I just want to say thank you for all that.
Okay. Well, this is my first time doing this. Am I entertaining? Omar, you've done this before. Like, well, you've done this. I've been here. I'm just remembering, like, should I be making these motions and then you guys can second? Is that how you want to do it? Or
Yeah, I think that my understanding from the past is you call for the motion, but
Okay. All right. So I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,579,173.57 for the various departments listed under Section 1 General Government, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations, with the following amounts to be transferred as recommended by the mayor and city council finance committee. Water sewer enterprise, $529,523.48. Parking fund, $7,500. Cannabis stabilization, $57,000. General stabilization, $1,800,000.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So now section 2, public safety. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $8,451,242.01 for the various departments listed under section 2, public safety, and the amount listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations as recommended by the mayor and city council finance committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Section 3, schools. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,675,000. Let me just start that over. $20,675,577.58 for the various departments listed under Section 3 schools, and that the amount listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations as recommended by the mayor and city council finance committee.
Second.
Motion second. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Section 4, Public Works. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city council, I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,256,099.92 for the various departments listed under Section 4, Public Works, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations, with the following amounts to be transferred as recommended by the mayor: water/sewer enterprise, $544,344.23. Sale of lots, $7,500.
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Section 5, Human Services. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $834,320.79 for the various departments listed under Section 5, Human Services, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations, with the following amounts to be transferred as recommended by the mayor.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Anything else? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Section 6, Culture and Recreation. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $772,700 from the various departments listed under Section 6, Culture and Recreation, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations as recommended by the mayor.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Section 7, Debt and Interest. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,180,676.34 for the various departments listed under Section 7, Debt and Interest, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations, with the following amounts to be transferred or raised as recommended by the mayor: water/sewer enterprise, $301,762.08. Debt exclusion taxation to be reduced by reserves for amortization, $3,310. Tax rate stabilization, $600,000.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Section 8, unclassified employee benefits. I move that, so I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $11,437,252.69 for the various departments listed under. You okay? Oh, it just.
No problem.
Yeah.
They can still hear.
Cool. For the various departments listed under Section 8, Employee Benefits, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations with the following amounts to be transferred as recommended by the mayor and finance committee. Water/sewer enterprise, $671,192.92.
So moved.
Motion second. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Section 9, community preservation. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $804,000 for the various departments listed under Section 9, community preservation, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations with the total amount to be raised and appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund as recommended by the mayor and city council finance committee.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Finally, 10, enterprise. I'll entertain the following motion. I move that the city vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,164,624.24 for the various departments listed under Section 10, enterprise, and that the amounts listed in the mayor's printed report, unless amended, be considered specific appropriations with the following amounts to be transferred as recommended by the mayor and city council finance committee. Water/sewer enterprise, $3,164,624.24.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. That's the whole thing. Cool. You did it best. All right. Is there any, we don't, again, we don't have to take like a vote for the overall thing, right? We're just sending the various at the council we hold, but not here. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, well, that being done, that's the only thing on our agenda. So I would entertain, unless anyone has anything else, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.